Oh, yeah. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Actuali Podcast. I'm Chris.
I'm DJ.
And tonight we are going to continue our series, The Kids Are Not All Right, from last week. If you did not get to check that episode, we highly recommend you go back and check it out and follow the links in the descriptions if you would like to learn more. This week, we're going to pick up right where we left off with Jonathan Haidt's interview with the gentleman of trigonometry, and then we're going to move on to Chris Williamson's interview with Haidt, and then to Jay Shetty's interview with Jonathan Haidt. Here we are trying to get to the bottom of understanding what is happening in the world today and how so many young people are experiencing dramatic rises in their rates of anxiety, depression, sense of meaninglessness, and hopelessness in life. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe to help support the show and help us reach more people. Your comments help the algorithm more than anything. I am monitoring our conversations this evening, so feel free to chat it up on whatever platform you are viewing us on. We are live on YouTube, we're live on Twitch, we're live on Facebook, and we're live on X, formerly known as Twitter. So you can hang out with us at any of those spots, and you can always catch the podcast after the fact on Actuali Podcast, wherever podcasts are found, be it Spotify, Apple, Google Podcast, Stitcher, etc., wherever you like to listen to podcasts. We are there. Throw it on some ratings and throw it on some comments there as well. All right, fam. So without further ado, let's go ahead and cue up this next video.
The video.
I don't know where we are at. There we go. And so this is Jonathan Haidt, and we're going to pick up right where we left off last week on trigonometry. Here we go.
Everything collapses.
And John, one of the things that I think is inevitably something we have to be honest about is, even if right now we did everything that you're saying, we still have one, maybe two generations who've been raised in this way, and there's nothing that can be done about it.
So 2 points on different sides. One, I do suspect, because puberty is such a crucial period of brain rewiring, I do expect that Gen Z will be less than it could be permanently. I think that Gen Z is not, even if we look at them in 30, 40 years, my prediction is they'll be less successful than they would have been if they'd had normal human childhoods. So I think we will see a permanent effect on Gen Z.
But that's a tragedy, John.
Oh, this is the greatest destruction of human capital in human history.
Yeah, it really is. And if you guys are interested in learning more about this, make sure that you view this specific episode titled We're Heading for Civilizational Collapse with social psychologist Jonathan Haidt on the Trigonometry Podcast here on YouTube. Continuing on, we're going to just kind of let them pick right back up here. Let's go.
We've taken an entire generation globally. Certainly, I don't have any data from the developing world, but in the developed countries, we've taken an entire generation. We've taken away what they need biologically to develop, risk exposure, hanging out time. We've taken all that away and given them something unnatural. So yes, this is, I believe, the greatest destruction of human capital in human history. I could be wrong. I'm making an argument that this is what has happened. But now on the positive side, even though there'll be a difference, I'm a social scientist, so if there's going to be an average difference, I'm going to talk about and say this is incredibly important. But it doesn't mean that each kid in Gen Z is condemned to a life of anxiety, because the human brain is quite malleable up through 25, and even after that, we can all learn new thinking patterns and new behavior patterns.
Yes, we can. So
The situation is not as quickly.
Not as quickly, though.
It takes time.
It takes a lot more time, depending on how set in your ways you really are. But we all can learn new patterns. The brain is incredibly malleable. As they say, it is plastic. And jumping ahead a little bit now here. Get on to 28.
Dum, 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 dum.
Dun, 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 dun. Da, 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 da. So right around, if we're in the right spot here. There we go. Perfect. Let's rock.
Sorry, internet's funky. The sun is doing some crazy things right now, mind you.
Yes. Yeah,
boy.
something is happening here.
We're going to cut back until that starts to work. Yeah, the sun's acting funny. And I guess, we're coming out of, not last week, but last week's episode. And, the kids are not all right. And, it's not just social media either. I can't stress that enough. It's very much also parenting styles.
Not letting kids engage in dangerous play.
Well, in schools.
Yep.
And what they're being taught in school, opposed to being taught to think, they're being taught, what to think, but they're also being taught, the victim oppressor mentality, and they're
As you see here.
and it's not good.
No, it's actually deeply concerning here.
And people are like, "Wow, no, it's not happening." It's like, dude, look at the curriculum for your students, man. It's some really shocking stuff. Even if it's not all the weird, kinky stuff that's being put in there, it's still methods of learning that are proven not to work.
Mm-hmm.
Reading. There's phonics, which is like how you read by, you sound out the word.
Actual phonetics, yeah.
Yeah, so and that's really good for learning to read, because you see a P, and then you see an O, and then you see another P. Okay, pop. Oh, pop. Okay, I recognize that word. They'll teach kids now whole word reading. So looking at the word like it's a shape and trying to remember that. And so and some people do that. Those are exceptionally smart people, and it's how they can read really fast and learn languages really fast. But kids, no. It doesn't work on kids, and we see that it doesn't work on kids.
Phonetics was always the way.
Yeah, remember Hooked on Phonics?
Yeah, worked for me.
Yeah, I didn't even, the commercial worked on me.
So I got it up and running again now. We can jump back on over here.
Okay.
So let's jump in here about the challenge of having Gen Z as employees with low initiative, anxiety, and so on. Here we go.
Generation has stereotypes of the one after them. They're soft, they're self-involved. That's been true since about the 16th century. Once you get modernity, you get rapid change. Each generation thinks the one behind it is defective.
Yeah, well,
but that's always
the way
been
of
the case.
things.
What we have here is something very new. Gen Z is not just that they're different, it's that they're really anxious, fragile, they have no attention to focus on things, and they're just not very effective. And so I teach in a business school. I speak to a lot of people in business, and I always ask them, how are things going with your Gen Z employees? I've only once heard a good thing. It's almost always like, oh my God. I mean, they're so anxious, and they're always taking days off, and they don't take initiative on things, and they expect others to come and fix things. I mean, so Gen Z is not integrated into the workforce well. None of this is their fault. This poor generation, they were the first that were completely deprived of play, and then they were the first to go through puberty on smartphones. And then, just as they're coming out of high school or college, just as they're going into the workforce, COVID hits. So this is a generation that they were just blocked and blocked and blocked from developing skills that will make you effective in business or in life. So there's no criticism of them here. There's sympathy.
No, if anything, we're criticizing the generation before.
Integrating into the workplace.
We're teaching them like this.
Yeah, fair point. So yeah, we're definitely not trying to disparage anybody here. We really are trying to figure out how to help and be of service in this time, and it's a tricky one considering how severely affected. I mean, any of us that have grown up in the last, I think 40 years have experienced quite a tremendous rate of change. Grandparents that are old than us can tell you their own reflections on how fast things have changed, but they continue to exponentially increase, it seems, the technological rate of development, and our capacity or our ability to be able to adapt to these rapidly changing systems is, of course, not going to be as fast as the change of the technology. So how can we become more anti-fragile? How can we actually slow things down or gain enough stillness within our own selves to be able to track the change and meet it as it's occurring? Because right now we certainly don't have the tools in place, at least at large, for us as civilizations to learn how to adapt to such rapidly changing times.
Well, I think a way of doing that is, and he mentioned every generation thinks that the previous generation is, flawed,
right?
or
Since like the
corrected.
16th century, since the advent
Probably
of modern.
since time, since humans are humans. Teenagers have always been teenagers. We've always looked at the past a little different, and I think a certain amount of it is healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you need to be able to look at the past and sort out and identify like what is the more or less optimal pieces of that, say like mindset or tradition or.
And the youth being idealistic, always push at the edges of
they
what's
push
possible.
at that edge, whereas when you get older, you push at, or you pull back at that.
You say, wait, no, there's a reason we do things this way. We've done them this way for a long time because it's tried and true.
Well, when it comes to being, more anti-fragile, a good way is to look at probably like the most anti-fragile generation, and that would be like the silent generation. And we're already pretty good at, identifying the repressive characteristic or the undesirably repressive characteristics of that generation. And I think we've gone too far, it's like,
They're trying to correct.
Homophobia really isn't a good thing, but also, super gay orgies all over the place also isn't a good thing either. Like, and I'm not knocking people that live a lifestyle or nothing like that. I'm not saying it, but there's obvious evidence that.
That goes for heterosexuals too, right?
Yeah, just orgies in general, stay away from, or even sexuality, the super, conservative, don't show even your ankle or anything like that. We know that that's
trying to
not
meet
good.
Needs for love and companionship with.
Yeah, but so realizing it's like, okay, well, being sexist, this, that, or the other isn't good. But and then you flip that and you look at yourselves, okay, where are we going too far as well? Or, okay, so identify the bad, but also identify the good and what makes the anti-fragile, say in this example, sorry to loop us back around, and look at it and then find the most optimal things they're doing. So we're pretty good at looking at the inoptimal, repressive end. We need to look at what were they doing right, though?
Yeah,
because
the
they were
self-control side.
They were healthy, and they built this whole civilization that has given us the the cell phones and the cameras and the mass communications.
So let's understand the resilience.
Yeah.
The self-control.
Essentially rescuing the baby from the bathwater
Yeah.
before it's being thrown out the window. And we can do this. Like, we have changed so much within recordable history, like, audio recordings and video recordings and other stuff that we can actually literally look back and, rescue the beneficial old ways, if you will. We don't have to create new things. There's this tendency, it's like we worship the novel nowadays. Well, if it's new, it must be good, better.
Always,
push into this new idea, this new, well, that's very much revolution.
Before
right?
it's been tested, even.
Yeah.
We jump to accept and push these new novel
and then
advancements.
And then when they do get tested and they find that they fail, now you're on the side if you can't let go and find something better, holding on to what was new. And now you're the worst inoptimal portions of society that are going to be looked back on and be like, yeah, they're kind of right about this, but then,
right. Yeah. So jumping on now to the next. How will this generation affect the laws and the culture and the challenge for secular societies? Let's go.
I guess what I'm asking is, what is going to be their impact on culture, politics, and everything else? Because people who are highly anxious and all of the other things you list, I imagine the laws that they might want to pass are going to be different to people who are resilient. I imagine the way that they interpret existing laws is going to be different. I imagine, you mentioned being a collective generation. Like, what are they going to want?
That's right. No, that's right. So one of the things I'm very concerned about, I'm very concerned, I think you guys have talked about this too, is the difficulty of having a large, diverse secular society. Human groups, we evolved in fission fusion communities. We're very good at coming together to fight another group, but once we reach a certain size, we tend to split. Civilization is a way of having much, much larger groups, traditionally united by shared gods, shared blood, and shared enemies. That's the human way. That's been true for 5,000 years. So you can have civilizations based on shared gods, shared blood, shared enemies, and those can be very stable for many generations.
Yes. Okay. So this is really important. How a very anxious generation with a deep sense of meaninglessness and a lack of transcendent morals that guide us If everything's subjective, then there is no higher morality that we can all try and rise towards. Then what happens? What kind of laws, what kind of society are we going to create?
Well, and you can look at what's being called for, now by, the idea of, instead of creating a solution for a problem, it's just regulate it. And when you regulate it, you're punishing somebody else.
We don't try and create
it.
wiser, more well-educated people. We just try and censor speech. And we don't recognize the transcendent value of free speech to functioning democratic republics.
Yeah, and instead of if you have to create a law for something, your society has failed in one way or another. Now, there's laws that are common among most, if not all, societies that are at least worth their salt. Things like, murder, like humans still murder. And it's something that we, no amount of enlightening the population is going to keep us from killing each other. We're too passionate of creatures. That's just not a thing.
Yeah, we can get better.
But, like to have a law for, no jaywalking laws. It's like, well, there's something wrong if, jaywalking is dangerous, as dangerous as they say, or, well, we need a law that says you have to take this, or you have to do this, or you have to achieve this standard in education. Well, there's something wrong with our society, like particularly within education.
If we're having to have laws to force the compliance,
exactly.
rather than being inspired in that direction because we recognize the value of it inherently.
Societal cultural practices, and you won't need the law.
Right.
Like, if you say, if some magical utopian society where we really respect intelligence and hard work and merit and all that stuff, we wouldn't have to write laws that say, don't discriminate on race and don't have crap ass schools. Well, frankly, in my opinion, if the schools weren't subsidized, the crap ass schools would just go under and be replaced by something that's better anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, laws are there for our failings. So if you want to write more laws and make a regulation for something that punishes other people,
you can't legislate morality. That's something that has to be learned.
Yeah, and unfortunately right now...
and agreed upon by the culture, So once you start losing that shared language and shared sense of morality, things can fall apart very quickly. And it is incredibly destabilizing for us. We don't feel like we're on sturdy ground anymore. No wonder the rates of anxiety and depression and meaninglessness are skyrocketing.
Yeah, we literally don't know where we're standing, when anything's happening. We don't have a solid framework, or the solid framework that's underneath our feet seems like a writhing mass of snakes to some. And then, the sky above our head that we're moving into seems like a writhing mass of snakes to others. It's just like, man, but we have the power. We are unique as far as creatures go. We have thumbs, and we have mental thumbs too that allow us to grasp concepts. Yeah. Brought back some old school Vervaeke.
Heck yeah. Rock and roll, baby. Yeah, guys, check out our Meaning Making 101 series. We're covering the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. We have a playlist here on the YouTube for that. All right, so we're jumping back over now to Jonathan Haidt and the Gentleman of Trigonometry. Let's go.
But in the West, we developed these liberal democracies. And as an American, I'd like to take credit. I mean, there are earlier democracies, but I'll take credit for, our founding fathers were incredibly wise political philosophers. They read history. They were amazing social psychologists. They knew that democracy is unstable because people are passionate and the people can't just rule themselves. You can't have direct democracy. But let's come up with a system where you don't have direct democracy, but yet the people can throw them out of power. The people ultimately can say, no, we don't like this. So they set up this elaborate, almost like an elaborate clock with, counterweights and gears and pulleys. And at the time, Ben Franklin said, he was asked the famous line, he was asked, what kind of government have you given us? And he says, a republic, if you can keep it.
Yeah.
Meaning if the people have sufficient virtue to keep this going, you can keep it. But if the people don't have certain virtues, then this thing is going to fall apart.
So how do we instill virtue in our culture? That's why we actually covered that Awakening series, so that we could discover that for ourselves.
Yeah, and what he just described there is an optimization balance, right? This democratic republic is a balancing between personal not the word's not sovereignty. It is, oh man, just had the word
responsibility or reliance. Or?
Well, all of that, autonomy. Thank you.
There you go.
Personal autonomy, which should always be there, because if we don't have personal autonomy as a species, we go crazy. So we need that, but personal autonomy is very fickle, and we need to have societal cohesion and the longevity of the species as well.
We need the counterbalances in there, and we need the species
so
to be able
it's
to,
like respecting the individual, but then also respecting the negative aspects of the individual that keep us from getting together to create sufficiently integrated and large societies together long enough to not be exterminated by the next big rock coming from space, because that's the goal.
Yeah.
Like really, we're just, machines that, non-spiritually speaking, but the physicality of us is machines that want to replicate themselves. The DNA wants to go, life wants to life. And we are the pinnacle species that has, been chosen or created, or whatever you want to think about it, that has the ability to actually make the change to save ourselves.
We do. We actually do. It's incredible to be something that has this level of self-awareness and self-reflection and a view back in history, so we are aware of our past, mistakes and accomplishments as a species, which is really profound. So all of the knowledge that we have today is due to all of those that came before us and figured things out. And we can very easily get caught up in a superiority mindset where we think we know better than everything that came before us, and that disconnect. We were talking about this on previous episodes, how we need to have that generational dialogue so that we can understand the hard-won realizations that those that came before us are handing down, and why they are handing them down, what's useful in them, and so that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater as we're trying to progress ideals as well along the way. So we need that push and pull, that reciprocal give and take process to focus in on what works best constantly between the generations. So we help each other calibrate the ways of being that are most conducive to long-term survival for our species, and hopefully the long-term survival of what is most good and true in us. Not the fearful, anxious sides of ourselves, the controlling, dominating sides of ourselves, but the loving, compassionate, considerate, understanding sides of ourselves. And we learn how to tame the monsters within us that we can defend and protect when we need to, but those monsters within us cannot take us over. We have them in check. We are the master.
Well, ideally, we either need new rituals or we need to rediscover old rituals, and that's not so crazy.
It seems like a bit of both right now.
We got a lot of like neo-pagan people that want to go out in the woods and worship the moon and do all that stuff, or take the ayahuasca, or go on a long hiking journey, sojourn, if you will. Like there's this urge for us to rescue these old,
and to reconnect with the earth, reconnect with the sense of sacred. So it's no wonder that people are looking at different spiritual systems, that we had this whole New Age movement come about as the belief in the old ways started to die off. And now we are recapitulating our understanding of God, and our idea of God has grown up with us. So that transcendent source that remains a great mystery is still there, still accessible, still can be related with.
And it's not all right, and it's not all wrong. There's still some to glean. And we don't, like when we go back to those kind of things, we don't go back in their original pure sense, nor do we go back to them in a new way that's even better. It's just this kind of weird, murky hybrid of things. So when we're looking back at stuff, it's like, well, we can never do it like they did it back then, because that's back then and this is now.
No,
we're completely different.
But
now.
there is still something that genuine that they're tapping into, that we have to understand,
and also
tap back into.
Personally fallible, so when it comes to a new way to recreate it, we're going to mess up.
Yeah, for sure.
We're going to mess up as we do.
It's going to take generations. And that's the process. I mean, that's how we got Christianity and Buddhism and everything in the first place. Is it was generations and generations of figuring things out and what worked best for those cultures at the times. Each individual spiritual system has its own cultural baggage, but we certainly do not want to throw the baby away.
Well, if it doesn't, I don't trust it.
Yeah, right. Because we're human. We are infallible.
Well,
we're
no,
all
but-
pointing at the infinite, trying to relate with it and describe how to have a relationship with that transcendent source. But we are imperfect beings, and we have limited language and limited knowledge, and we can only go so far before we start to screw things up, so we have to constantly be checking ourselves and reflecting on what we're doing and how is this working. Is this good for one and all? Is this healthy for the individual, and is this healthy for the community? So let me see what our next point here is.
Point.
Yes,
It's
next
It's a thing
clip.
you can do. It's a shape. It's a fact of matter and material. Language, such a wonderful thing. We'd be doomed without it.
Really?
I think.
Here we go.
Yep.
Wouldn't we though? So let's
Boom.
go.
Filming that he said, when there's a problem to be solved in France, everyone waits for the king to do it. And in England, they wait for the local nobles to do it. But in America, they form a committee and they each put in a few dollars and they say, we're going to build this bridge over this river that we need, or we're going to build a school or a hospital, whatever it is. So he admired this can-do spirit of Americans. And a key idea, which Greg and I developed in the coddling, is in order to become self-governing as a nation, you need citizens who can be self-governing in their lives. Citizens who can work out conflicts without always going to the police or the courts.
Healthy
Citizens
individuals.
who can work out conflicts by themselves. And all of us had childhoods where we were forced to become self-governing because there were no adult, in the afternoon or on weekends, you're out playing. So it's those conflicts on the playground. You have a game and you say, well, here's the boundary. And someone says, that was out of bounds. And you have to adjudicate, like, no, it wasn't. And how are we we want to keep the game going, so we've got to work it out. All that is essential stuff in childhood to create self-governing individuals, which can allow you to have a self-governing republic.
Yes, we learn through play, don't we? And if you cut off children from that figuring things out themselves, amongst themselves process, and parents are always jumping in, the kids are taught to always go to the authority to solve any kind of problem or disagreement or insult that they receive, they don't learn how to govern themselves, how to solve problems, how to create situations of conciliation and resolution.
Yeah, as it turns out, we as little, when we're little creatures and little beasties, we need to, fight each other to a certain degree and
Learn how to resolve the conflict.
yeah, and sometimes hurt ourselves and like you're skateboarding or ride your bicycle or
Learn
whatever,
how to handle dangerous
and be
situations.
like, well, we're like a mile away from home in a place that we shouldn't have been. Like how do you figure it out? And then it teaches us barriers and freedoms, and we have adults who haven't gone through that process of integrated play, as in like play that's integrated into learning about life, not just entertainment, but just play. The wrestling. What does wrestling teach you? It teaches you how strong you are, and it teaches you how strong somebody else is, and then it teaches you a certain amount of etiquette to keep the people that are you're playing with to keep playing with you.
How to manage your body in difficult circumstances, how to remain calm and keep breathing.
How to
when
be
you're
aware
tied
of
up
somebody else's body in certain circumstances,
Yes.
so. Yeah, and that translates into interpersonal relationships throughout the workplace, throughout your marriage, throughout something as abstract as your county level relationship with the people in your county, or as abstract as country level. Like, and without that, well, we're obviously seeing what's happening. People don't have the skills to. Well, they haven't even set themselves up to understand their limits, the limits of others, the limits of ideas, and I hate to say it, limitations.
How
Not in
to
a
deal
bad
with
way,
people
but-
with different views and different ways of being
Well, sure. That's why the screeching
without having to
thing
run
is the
to an
thing,
authority.
That's
To
literally,
shut them down, to censor them, to cancel them,
or just
to forbid them.
scream. Like, we've all probably seen, at least like a clip, like a meme clip of, the screeching Karen or leftist or whatever it might be. Yeah, they're not thinking about it like, oh, if I'm just really loud, it'll confuse them and scare them away. No, it's a biological instinctual result of threat that they don't know how to deal with. So what do? They break down and they scream.
Yeah.
And they get either angry or afraid. And afraid and angry, when you're not in control of yourselves, can be the same thing. It's like the
and then they're looking
cornered
for vengeance.
animal thing. It screeches out and then it attacks you.
Yeah.
But it turns out they're not cornered. They just think they are.
That's the problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's weird, man.
So yeah, we're going to actually dive into that now, because we're going to learn a little bit about microaggressions, attitudes towards free speech, and how, Gen Z being raised with this insistence on microaggressions are violence, and that censorship is okay. All of these things are, of course, incompatible with functioning, healthy democracy and republic. Let's go.
Back to your question. It's possible that we'll have a complete rupture in American history. It's possible that Gen Z and later were deprived of the opportunity to develop the virtues that we've always assumed would be there. Not that I'm late baby boomer. Not that my generation did such a great job. I mean, Gen Z bears none of the blame for the mess that America's in now. But I'm afraid that we have ill prepared them to handle this mess. We're going to have a lot more. We've already seen it. They've been raised with these ideas of microaggressions and trigger warnings. So they think that many of them think that speech is violence. And Greg Lukianoff and FIRE have been charting this out. And I was doing also with Heterodox Academy, we charted out a lot of this. Attitudes towards free speech are really changing rapidly in Gen Z. Because if, we were raised with sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never harm me. Of course, names do hurt, but this was a way of saying, you know what? I'm not going to go ahead, insult me. I'm not going to react. But the new thing is, if you say anything that I can in any way interpret as a criticism of me or my group, you've committed an aggression. Someone has to punish you because you're hurting me.
Yeah. And that gives you power.
And this means we are stuck in endless conflicts over somebody said something. This is something I hear from business people too. Oh, you see it especially in progressive organizations. There have been a few articles written about the chaos within politically progressive nonprofits because it's just constant conflict over someone said something. Like, can't we do our work? The older people say, no, because somebody said something. So yes, I think we're going to see a change in values and social abilities that may be incompatible with the American form of democracy.
Well,
That's quite concerning.
Or maybe not form, but conception of democracy. Because most people think that we are a democracy, even though, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, the republic thing in there.
A democratic republic. It's quite different, because mob rule democracy means that if the majority of people feel a certain way and they want to pass laws in respect to that, and the majority of people could be, say you're not a Trump voter and the Trump voters are the majority. Do you want to have to abide by what this larger group of people demands, because they're the mob, they have the numbers, because sometimes the majority are wrong. And you need protections from minority interests. So this is where republicanism comes in. And that's why we are actually a republic with democratic functions to it.
Well, and you could think of it this way too. It's like not even just, the 49% being ruled over by the 50%. Getting 50% of people to agree on anything is damn near impossible. Getting 12% of people to agree on anything is really hard. So really it would be the rule by a minority of very active people. And to a certain extent, we already have this, in any, whether it's fringe Democrat or fringe Republican, that makes well, actually I can't say that anymore, because fringe Republican is just like, what is that? That's the neocons, and they're already in with the Dems at this point. Yep. But what I'm saying is a small proportion of people within a democracy, an actual democracy, less than 12%. You can talk about 3 or 4% if they're weaselly enough and
loud enough,
and loud enough, do whatever they want. Look what happened over the summer of love riots and BLM and all that stuff. It's like, there was rioting, there was they say it's only $2 billion of damage. I beg to differ. That was $2 billion of insurance claims that were paid out, and insurance for a lot of people, doesn't cover riots. So there was that, and, mostly peaceful protest, and the media went all on board, and we're not going to.
Whole city blocks were burned.
Oh, dude, look up Wauwatosa and Kenosha, like what happened there. And that's East Coast people. If you want to look at West Coast, just pick up Portland, Oregon, or, Seattle, or, multiple, what was it?
San Francisco.
Yeah. And then I forget where it is, but, Berkeley, California, they were literally walking down the street having thousands of people chant, death to America.
Yeah.
Like American people.
Yeah, meanwhile, we live in the most multicultural, least racist country on the planet, surprisingly enough.
Yeah, so
go travel and find out.
And long, I guess what I'm saying is, we have this, conception of we're a democracy, and if enough of us behave as that and don't pay attention to the laws or pay attention to the republic as it is and realize, yes, we do have constraints, and unfortunately we do have to move within this overly gargantuan system to get anything done. Now, mind you, I think we could be paring back a lot of what the federal government does, give it to the states, and then pare back a lot of what the states do and give it to, the counties, and then pare back what the county does and just give it to the freaking individuals.
Yeah. Yeah, this federal government has an immense amount of power these days. And gosh, we're like $30 trillion something in debt. So
we got like the freaking biggest government, man. We got a bigger government than the CCP, man. Well, that's the Chinese Communist Party, but they are the government.
Oh yeah.
In their area.
So let's jump ahead to our next clip now, guys. You ready? Here we go.
Very much on that point, there was another thing you mentioned, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot. You said people...
Oh, yeah. Strong men create good times. Weak men create hard times. That's what we're getting into
Strong
here.
men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create hard times.
Hard times. Yeah.
Yeah. And hard times make strong men.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Can unite into civilization that's bigger than, the Dunbar number of 250 people or whatever, or 100, whatever, 150. If they've got shared blood, shared gods, shared enemies. Mm-hmm. I would argue we've got at best one of them and the worst one, which is we might be able to say we have a shared enemy. And even that, I think, is in dispute at this point.
That's right.
Like, how the hell do we keep this thing together?
Yeah. So here's where there's a really wonderful Arabic word called asabiya, which I take from the 14th century Muslim scholar Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun was one of the theorists of cyclical history. You get these theories in ancient Greece, you get them in Islam, you get them today. The observation, he observed that a tribe would come out of the desert, knock over the soft, rich people in the city, take over, enjoy their riches, but their grandchildren are now pretty soft, and the same thing happens again. Mm-hmm. So there's an internet meme. Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times. So I think that is happening. Now, how do you keep, and those were tribal societies. These were still based on lineage, those societies that he was writing about. In a secular liberal democracy like the United States, we have to, and asabiya is the word for like cohesion, trust, the ability of a group to act. And
act together.
Nothing creates asabiya like a foreign attack. Mm-hmm. So World War II and especially Pearl Harbor, that created America. I mean, that's responsible for so much of America's greatness in the late 20th century, because my parents' generation, everybody who remembers that attack, they all came together. For 5 years, everything was for the war effort. They were united. And then when they went on to go into politics, they could work together. Mm-hmm. We call them the greatest generation. So having if you keep your eye on asabiya, you could, or cohesion, you can address this question of what can a large liberal democracy, a secular one like the UK or the US, what can you do?
Yeah.
Asabiya. Well, and man, like the late 1800s, early 1900s were full of innovation, but they were hard, man. you know what, we had we just came off of, you know, flus and things that wiped out a lot of freaking people. And then, you know, economies crashing, and then war, you know, the Great War, not World War I, but the Great War, and then World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that's like the boomer phenomenon isn't just an American phenomenon. It happened around the world because we were brought to the brink of destruction. So when people, you know, got back, they're like, we're breeding,
Making babies.
we're making babies as many as we can, biggest family. And, you know, there was a lot of, you know, like the military industrial complex is a problem, but it did create a manufacturing base to start creating goods enough to afford for the people to have these families.
Yeah.
Right. You know,
People felt safe again, so they were having families again. Yeah.
Well, and even when we're not feeling safe, we have kids.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the Middle East ain't a safe place, and they have kids.
Oh, yeah.
They have lots of kids. It's actually a way for our species to safeguard ourselves against unsafety, is having more kids. It's we are too safe and not wise enough to keep on with certain traditions we need to have.
Yep.
You know, it's like we're too safe. It's like, well, we don't need kids. They're actually kind of like they interfere with what I want to do.
It's a really selfish culture, isn't it?
Well, you know,
at this point,
well, good times. You know, like
we're
is
just
about the
interested
self.
in sensations and self gratification.
Yep. And being willing to be convinced that, you know, we're overpopulated and, you know, we're going to kill off the planet because humans are, you know, this horrible, awful thing. It's like we're our own evil demiurge. It's weird.
Really?
It's a weird relationship to have with oneself.
Yeah. Yeah. So shared blood, shared gods, and shared enemies used to be what created social cohesion. Then we came up with this democratic republic, this melting pot. We still had shared gods and shared enemies, but it seems that today we don't have any of that. It's all decaying. And so we at least need a shared sense of wonder for that sacred, ineffable source from which we all spring, whether or not we agree on exactly what it is. You know, we each have our own versions, but we have to get those versions talking to each other now so we can celebrate each other's renditions of a relationship with the sacred.
And I would have to say, too, we have to get away from this postmodern mindset that, you know, everything's just, you know, relative. You know, there is no good or bad. It's just, you know, like, well, it's like, no, we need to go ahead and be comfortable and okay with being like, no, in our culture where we're at, like say in America, certain things aren't acceptable.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Certain ideas and practices aren't acceptable. You know, like, but it's, you know, if you say that, you're some type of ist or igot or, you know, whatever it is. It's like, no, like now to go after people and be like, you're this color, so you're unacceptable. Yeah, that's bigotry. Or be like, you're a little different and your food smells funny. I don't like you. Yeah. Okay. No, that's not what I'm talking about. You know, but we've lost the ability to really put our finger on being like, no, like this ain't working for us. And well, there is one side that's really good at doing is like, well, this old way, this isn't working for us and we're going to change it. And they're very forceful with doing it.
Yeah, really.
And that's why we're getting the change in the wrong, well, I won't say wrong direction, but too far in one of the directions that you can go.
Yeah, I would agree on that.
So it's like, but we have to realize that morality is not relative. It's not. And if you say, oh, well, yeah, it is. It's like, okay, well, in what culture would it be okay to just murder somebody or rape somebody? Really? Like, do we have to go darker with the crimes? It's like, no, like morality comes from something that's more than just our whim and how we'd like things to be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, you know, call it God, call it, you know, just the way nature works, call it whatever you want. But
and regardless of what we all believe, we all still need each other.
Oh, yeah.
We are a social species.
Oh, yeah.
And we have many different ways of figuring out how to resolve conflicts with one another when we are willing to do so. We just have to have that willingness, that care for one another enough to be able to put up with one another long enough to understand each other once again.
Well, interestingly enough, that ability to say like, no, not this, at least, and we're not doing this, actually can inspire and garner respect from people to be like, well, why do you think people wanted to come to the Americas when they had to like come on boats and they may not survive you know, and then get on this freaking island and have their name changed and put in a slum, you know, just to build, you know, like the chance to build. It's like, well, there's this inspiration of like, look, we're going to be the land of free and the home of brave, and we're not going to put up with totalitarian people, whether you're a king or anything else, and we're not going to do this and this and this and this, and
we want religious freedom.
And we may be a Christian nation, but we want religious freedom, and we don't want the government to say no, you can't.
That's right.
Unless, of course, part of your religion is like, stealing somebody's loved one or pet, or like I don't think that like whatever Aztec or Mayan, like sacrificing people at the top of a pyramid thing's gonna work, but within reason. You know what I mean? Like, go ahead and pray. Go do you. If you want to do it once a day or once every 5 days or whatever, do you.
Yeah, we have prevailing laws of don't murder, don't steal, things like that. As long as the religion can match up with that, of course, it's allowed. And that's why we allow everything here, and even Satanism. You're allowed to practice here.
Oh, and it's out in the open now. Like, just
very
watch
much
popular
so,
music and all this popular crap. It's me, self.
Everybody rebelling against this Disney low resolution idea of God as some judgmental father in the sky figure, which is the
only
easiest,
one aspect of God.
The easiest thing to attack. It's a very kindergarten rebuttal. Mystical Christianity, for one, is incredibly deep, and we also, all the mystical roots of all the great world traditions are on par with that. And those things are not easily argued against, as one may think. It's not all about a literalist, fundamentalist belief, blind acceptance. There's certainly a much higher calling, even in Christianity, than most people would even begin to suspect.
But I do feel like that we are, in general, fleeing from our responsibilities.
Self-responsibility,
because, like the thing about religion, whether it's Christianity or anything else like that, it requires you to have responsibility over yourself and those around you, and to behave in a certain manner. And there is punishment, whether it's from God or from the fact that if you do certain things, your freaking life's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
But like in America right now, we've gone too far into the everything's fine, oh no, and just pushing the stuff off. It's like, and then ridiculing the, oh, it's just a point, man in the sky with the pointy finger. It's like, well, that's only one part. That's the, maybe in your head, the accuser bit that you want to go away from and think that your sad little life where you don't take responsibility for anything, and you're in your little polycule of the group of friends where everybody's just screwing each other and with the bad jobs, and everybody's working in the same kitchen and talks the same amount of crap about each other, and like, and all that stuff. And it's like, well, I'm an atheist, I'm better than all y'all. It's like, well, Christian dude who converted Christianity that was working the fryer and you don't see him no more. Yeah, that's because he went to school and he got a job or got training and got out of it. They're rapturing themselves. It's not a religious rapture, but the people that are waking up. You ever wonder why you don't really see them much anymore? And I'm not saying like you or anybody directly who we're talking to, but why? It's like, oh, we don't see so and so much anymore. Yeah, well, maybe because
they're engaging with the world now instead of just insulting and complaining about it.
Or hiding from it,
or hiding from it and escaping from it. Yeah. All right, so now we're going to learn more about why the left and the right need each other. Let's go.
So, if you have a society in which some people, they just really want to change, they question everything. Why do we do it this way? Why don't we do it differently? Well, it's good to have some people who do that. But then you also have some people who say, no, the old ways are tried and true. Let's not go changing them until we, unless we really need to. And so this is Edmund Burke. This is the conservative impulse.
And going too far as a
when I started The Righteous Mind, I was a progressive. I wanted to help the Democrats stop losing, to George W. Bush. And I was very much on the left. But by the time I finished the book, I realized, wow, to have a good society is so difficult. And you got to get the settings just right. And if you have some people pushing for change and some people resisting, you get this dynamic that can be incredibly productive. That's when I really became a centrist. As a social scientist, I was increasingly bothered that most social scientists are on the, not just that, almost all are on the left, other than some economists. They're almost all on the left, but many of them act as though they are the support team for the Democratic Party. And I used to be like that too. And I think that is unprofessional. We've got to stop.
Yeah.
Good for him admitting that and calling that out.
Yeah, well, dude, like for real though, like what is this party?
Yeah.
Like, what does it stand for? The things change over time. So it's like, why would you be stuck? Like, why would you affix yourself to such a, and I don't want to say intangible or amorphous, but a amorphous idea where it's like, oh, I'm this party and the Democrats. It's like, what if a bunch of buttheads, you know, get in charge of it and are just taking it downhill? And like, are you still going to do that? Well, yeah, it's unprofessional because, well, professional intellectual honesty and everything, but also it's just stupid. It's like personally stupid just to hold on. Well, this is my party, and we do this because, you know, it's like, well,
Well, you know you're ideologically captured if you're doing that.
Well, you know, like the thing is like me and you could believe exactly the same thing and be of two different parties, right?
Yep.
We're at two different parties, right? And we both believe the same thing. We both like the same freaking drink we have, but we're at two different parties, so we can't relate. It's like, well, not your party. It's what it represents in the moment as it's going on. And, you know, like, and when it comes to political party, it's like, man, like, what do the Democrats stand for? Well, they stood for, you know, slavery and all this other stuff, but they changed and, you know, now they're changing back. And what are Republicans? Oh, well, they're, you know, just money grubbing and they don't care about the poor and but they're changing now. It's just like, well, it's just a name. It's just a temporary grouping of people. Now we have a geriatric governance system and they've been in there for a while, but just a freaking name. So it's more like, okay, I'd rather, like, what do you want to do? What are you getting in to do? Like, hey, we're interacting. What do you want to do? Okay, we want to do this. Okay, you want to go eat? Okay, what are we going to eat? Well, you know, like, I can't eat that because I'm allergic to that. And then we should be talking like that.
We're not even getting to know one another anymore to even be able to have that conversation because I'm thinking of you as the party that you are part of.
Yeah.
Instead of as an individual human being with depthless complexities to you.
Yeah, and I get labeled like a hippie all the time, and I'm not a hippie. I just look like a hippie, but for real though, it's like, oh, you must be one of them hippies, and I'm like, I'm probably a little bit more conservative than you are.
Thin line between artist and hippie.
Yeah, well, you know, I just got bushy hair too, and I like to wear kilts, so that, you know, you're a hippie.
That'll do it.
And I'm hippie social. It's fine. Like I don't mind hippies too much. They get on my nerves. So.
And I love all the people though, man. And yeah, there's stereotypes that are sometimes
well, yet again, it's just a name.
fitting.
It's just a name too, you know.
But they're also just stereotypes. Yeah, and they're just names. They're just labels, and everyone's obsessed with labels. And we feel like when our label gets attacked, that we're personally being attacked. And it's not a personal attack, but our egos become so attached to our beliefs and identify with our beliefs. We think that's who we are, is what we believe, and it's not. It's the mark of wisdom when somebody can entertain an idea without accepting it. And that's something that I think a lot of us could practice a lot more, because then we'd be able to hear each other again, and we'd be able to solve the great problems our species faces together, even as we may have some differences in how we think is the best way to handle something. Put all those best ways to handle something together. Let them compete in the marketplace of ideas. Let them whittle each other down. Let them combine. Let them marry. Let them conglomerate and get to know one another. And then we're going to find a new way that works best for one and all that none of us could have figured out by ourselves. And that's what we need to do. We need to continue calibrating together. That's why we have different beliefs. It helps us to see different sides of different issues, to be able to holistically address these incredibly complex problems we now face. So now we're going to jump ahead to Jonathan Haidt speaking with Chris Williamson on his podcast. And why the mental health crisis is getting worse, of course, is the subject matter. And we're going to get back a little bit to that problem of excessively gentle parenting, the helicopter-style parenting, the rising mental health crisis, how it's worse amongst kids raised by a political leaning. So this is interesting. Check this out, guys. Here we go.
So I think we become a little too gentle, too unstructured. And this might also help explain a really interesting twist in the data that it's not really in the book. I found a lot of it even afterwards, is that the mental health crisis is much worse for children in families on the left than on the right. So liberals or progressives have always had slightly higher levels of neuroticism, anxiety, depression, just a little bit more than conservatives.
And
It's
that's
a
a
big,
mental
long
makeup
studied thing.
thing as well
Conservatives are a
as
little bit happier
politics.
than liberals, adults and children. And if you plot out the levels of, of happiness or the negative stuff like meaninglessness, on all the graphs in my book, you'll see like you get a straight line until around 2011, 2012. And then all of a sudden, the lines go up like a hockey stick. Well, if you break it out by are you a liberal or conservative, which is asked on one or two surveys, it's the liberal kids, especially the liberal girls, they go up first and fastest. Something happened, whatever it was that changed in the early 2010s, it hit liberal kids, especially liberal girls, the hardest. And I think part of it is what we're talking about.
So we didn't get to cover this in the last episode, but this is a really interesting addition provided by Haidt here. The mental health crisis is getting worse amongst kids raised by liberals and progressives in today's society. Why is this happening?
And particularly among female kids.
Yes.
And I think there's something to this. So what does a liberal mindset do? And I happen to be mentally very liberal as far as the way the brain works. Well, it reaches out and it makes connections with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes out into the dark to make these connections. And it's willing to jump to something that is new. Well, during your pubescent upbringing and into teenage years, what do girls do? They're forming relationships with each other. They're willing to try this new thing, this new fad, this new clique, this new product, this new thing.
Mm-hmm.
And while now you have this nicely packaged product that isn't a product, it is getting the product to engage with it. And they're willing to take it out
product.
now. Yeah. So the women were are the largest cohort to jump onto social media first.
And the ones being impacted most direly by it.
Yeah. So no wonder. Whereas if you have like the more conservative mindset and you're a conservative girl, yes, you're still doing that, but the conservative mindset is more of familial piety, respecting your ancestors and people before you, conscientiousness, not overstepping on anybody else. So you can say like politeness. And there's certain, and that's
Also
the way your brain works,
Yeah.
not a label.
And those are the parents you're being raised by, and that's kind of how you're being conditioned.
And more likely they're gonna be like, no, you're not getting a cell phone until at least you're 16. Like we ain't putting up with this.
And then the conservative-minded are a little bit less to jump and immediately support the new.
Yeah.
They're a little bit apprehensive towards the new at first until they understand it fully and know that it's safe. Whereas more progressive inclined are going to jump towards the new a little bit faster.
There's a good
and both sides are necessary. We need this.
Oh yeah,
we need the bravery to jump forward. We need the bravery to hold back.
Yeah, so there's a good I would say probably more conservative parable about this. It's the frog and toad and the toad, and not the book's Frog and Toad, but which anyway. So basically, this frog and toad, and they meet up on the on a log every day, and the frog jumps in immediately, just like, yeah, this is wonderful, Toad, like you don't know what you're missing, and jumps in every day doing his little backflips into the water real quick. And Toad, day after day after day, he waits and he doesn't immediately jump in, and the frog keeps making fun of him, but it's great, and jumps in. And then there's one day he jumps in and the fish gets him, and then the toad gets in.
Wow.
After the fish has been fed.
Wow.
Because the toad took the time to watch and pay attention. Now, shame on that toad, because every day the toad saw that fish there and was like, yo, boy, there's that fish in that corner that's looking to get you.
Should have warned his boy.
And then there's the books, Frog and Toad, where are about like, they may be different, but they're still great friends. And no, Frog and Toad is not a gay couple. I don't care. Like the rainbow, the crazy rainbow cult. They got a hold of this and were like, no, they're a gay couple. And I'm like, okay, there's a little bit of gay stuff in there. Like, you know what I mean?
Someone
like,
doesn't have to be exactly like you for you to be able to relate with them. We all have the same blood running through our veins.
I'm not a frog or a toad. And I related with them. And I also don't wear tweed trousers.
Tweed trousers.
For real, though.
So before we get too off track there, let's jump back, because Haidt is going to continue on this point that he was just making, and how important structure and community is to us. So let's go ahead. Ready and rolling.
if you are rooted deeply in structure and community, and you have to go to church every Sunday, or you're an Orthodox Jewish kid, you've got Shabbat, you've got 24 hours where there are no devices and you're with your family. Moving to the digital technology didn't wash these kids out to sea. But if you're a more progressive family, usually a smaller family, more mobile, you move around more perhaps, you have weaker ties, a lot of freedom, a lot of creativity, but those kids seem to be especially vulnerable to being washed away in the early 2010s. It's not just left, right, it's also religious conservative, religious or secular. So secular conservative
He means to say religious conservative kids here.
Kids show the least increase. Everybody goes up, but they show the least increase. Whereas progressive, non-religious kids or families, that's where you see the biggest increase in mental health problems.
I wonder how much of it from the liberal progressive side comes from this very softly, gentle approach to discipline and parenting.
Yeah, that's a good point there.
Well, and then also, where is your weight of grounding? Where are your roots? And if you are non-religious, so secular and progressive, so trees don't walk, or they walk very slow.
Right.
And what I'm saying there is the progressive secular is constantly moving forward, but with no traditional grounding, no theological and spiritual grounding to keep you centered while you're moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, your conservative religious do have that grounding, and young people naturally want to move forward anyway. So even if you're brought up conservative and religious, you're still going to be forward moving, because that's just the nature of young people as they get older. To walk away from the old, and in some cases let it die where it needs to die, and then bring it with where it needs to bring with. But when you have this completely no grounding and as forward and fast as possible, it's going to make you sick. It's going to make you scared. It's going to make you, or it's going to limit your ability to pull things together in a salient fashion that you can hold with you enough to understand new circumstances, enough to cope, overcome, not let it destroy you.
Right. Yeah. We need our moorings. We need our compass. We need the keys by which to know how to operate in new, unexpected scenarios. So you're right. We need that anchor of those social systems that we develop through eons, such as those systems of spirituality that help us to understand what is morally right for us individually and for the collective, and to allow that to guide us as we move forward into new territory. We're going to be careful what we bring back with us when we go into that new territory. So learning to self-regulate is, of course, something that we have certainly seen recent generations lose access to, more and more so, the capacity for self-governance. And so we're going to hear a little bit on that now, and then we're going to learn about developing anti-fragility in children. So let's go ahead and jump on.
Because, I hesitate dropping into bro psychology this early in a podcast, but fuck it. Like, if you think about your level of discomfort exposure, what you're comfortable being uncomfortable with, how often has someone told you no? How often have you been told that you're in the wrong? How often has someone raised their voice at you? How often has someone been stern? All of these opportunities are times where you learn, okay, I can self-regulate. This can happen to me, and I'm still safe. This can happen to me, and I'm still loved. No one's going to abandon me. This isn't a comment on my moral character or my worth as a human. This is an inbuilt part of being a fallible, flawed human that makes errors. And mum and dad are going to say, you don't hit your sister. You don't do that. You're on timeout. Go sit on the step, and sit on the step until you've calmed yourself down. And if you've never experienced that, and you continue, You don't need to know anything about human psychology to know that if you train a system on a type of stimulus, it will become hypersensitized when you get outside the bounds of that stimulus.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a lot of what you were just talking about there, DJ. Yeah.
Well, and one thing, and I don't know if this made it into the clip pile. Last week we had a clip that was going to be lined up, but a part of that clip, and I think it's really important to express, is yes, you need somebody, or it's appropriate to be told, no, you can't do that. But you want to be limiting on how many restrictions you put on young people, or kids, because if it's constantly, well, no this and no that and no this and no that and no that, well, they become desensitized to the no now, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you use it sparingly in the right spots, they still listen to you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like using what he's talking about, but in reverse. You know, realizing that we do become, or excuse me, not desensitized, but sensitized, as in like, you know, if I built the calluses enough and I'm used to enough of the pain where shoveling doesn't hurt so much, or, you know, you don't notice the nicks on your fingers when you're doing stuff, or, you know, that pain you get, you know, like if you were a runner, you know, that, you know, like that, I feel like absolute garbage right before you start feeling better kind of thing, and know to push through that, but you get habituated to it. Well, the same thing on the negative end. If you tell them no too much and you're constantly nagging them and constantly in their life, they're going to sensitize that and just be like, okay, well, I'm over you. I know I know how to deal with you. And then that changes the child parent dynamic too, which is
really,
yeah.
So knowing how to be stern and win, using it sparingly but effectively, to be strong with it and not to give in as well when you need to be stern, because there are moments where you need to shock a child to some degree that is a really bad, dangerous thing that you just did. You cannot ever do that, or else you're putting yourself or someone else in jeopardy.
Sure, like being too close to the edge of a cliff, or trying to pet a bear, or, you know, like stuff like that. Whereas, you know, the other end of that is, well, yeah, there's a 2-foot ledge there, and you know, your 4 or 5-year-old could get hurt running around and being stupid, but they're gonna whiz through here and run out on the porch while they're chasing their brother or sister or whatever, and you just go, hey, the ledge, and then they fall off the ledge, and you're like, yeah, ledge, and they're like, ledge, and it's like, okay, let's go to the hospital. It looks like you might have sprained something. Come on.
Yep.
Shit. My sister used to come, like the stories I heard from my mom. My sister would come home like bleeding and stuff. Or like get a call, it's like, your daughter's bleeding, and she's like, and come on now,
it's a kid.
And also Maddie is the most my sister is like,
so
she's one of the more clumsy people, and I'm pretty clumsy too, but like,
right, all right, so jumping on over here, guys, one more clip. Let's learn about developing anti-fragility,
and that's where we are.
Right. No, I think that's perfect. I can just add a little psychological color to it in 2 ways. One is to bring in the concept of anti-fragility, which I hope many of your listeners are already familiar with. You know, some things are fragile. A glass is fragile. You don't let kids play with it. It'll break. So we give them plastic, which is resilient. If a kid drops it, it won't break, but it doesn't get better. Oh. But some things are anti-fragile. They need to be stressed and strained and dropped and suffer setbacks in order to get strong.
Yes.
And this comes from my NYU colleague, Nassim Taleb. So bones and muscle are anti-fragile. If you raised your kids by saying, I never want you to put stress on your bones, you know, never go downstairs, take the elevator, you know, their bones are going to get weak. Same thing with muscle. The immune system is anti-fragile, and kids are anti-fragile. So that's like the psychology underneath a lot of what you were just saying.
So we need to be exposed to danger, to damage, to
and not just resilient,
trials and tribulations,
not just resilient against, like, say, like plastic, but actually needs to be, for lack of a better word, messed up, stressed in order to be strong, like your bones. You know, what messes up the astronauts and why space travel is so tough is there is not that stress, and so it doesn't develop
an inner strength to be less fragile.
Yeah. And to be anti-fragile, using the, you know, the trials and tribulations of life to build those spiritual and psychological calluses that allow you to do.
That's a good segue there. Speaking of spiritual calluses. So now we're really going to get to, I think, the roots of where we can begin to develop a cure for this crisis we find ourselves in. So picking up on that spiritual tangent that Haidt was talking about with the trigonometry bros just a moment ago, we're actually going to get deeper into that element now. So let's go ahead and jump on over to this video. And here we go. This is on the Jay Shetty podcast.
So I did all this research on moral elevation, and the key to it is the psychology of up and down. Some things make us feel closer to God. Some things make us feel further from God. That's the way cultures talk about it. And it's always a vertical metaphor. God is up, the devil is down. So this is my view. I'm a Jewish atheist myself. I'm not a believer, but I've had some religious experiences. I've had a number of spiritual experiences. So I know these are an important part of human psychology. And once I put in that framework, that ancient traditions are trying to move us up. They're saying, meditate. Hindu traditions, Buddhist traditions, everything out of India is much more get control of your attention, get control of your consciousness. Otherwise, it just gets drowned in trivia. But no, meditate, live purely, do your work with mastery, come out like the moon, come out from behind the clouds and shine. That's a loose translation from the Dhammapada. But what does a phone-based life do? Constant notifications, constant interruptions. My students at NYU, they get 200 or 300 notifications a day on average on their phones. Ooh. Many of them never go 10 minutes without an interruption.
Okay. So we're not having time to self-reflect anymore. We're not learning to control our attention. We're not developing the mastery to know how to operate in any kind of circumstance because we're not spending enough time in stillness and self-realization. Moral elevation. That is the first part of the key to this problem.
Well, it seems like there's always an avenue to retreat and back away into. Mm-hmm. Pull into the phone, and even the using the phone that's very hidden. You're hiding behind the pole. Yeah. Kind of hiding into it and retreating back physically and mentally.
Very self-focused, self-involved, and we narrow our breadth of a potential attention. Mm-hmm. And we need to widen all of what we're allowing to enter our consciousness. And what?
And lengthen.
Yeah. Widen it, and increase the depth of the breadth and the depth. And so a sense of a sacredness in this world, it connects us together. And to be able to celebrate, even many different systems of spiritual systems can celebrate one another's realizations and insights and find those transcendent points of agreement that point to higher ideals that we can all rally around. And we know, Martin Luther King noted this, that in the Buddhist, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, all these ancient major world traditions, they all have seen love as the supreme unifying principle of life, that is the highest according to all the great spiritual traditions around the world. That right there gives us a key. That's something that we can ground ourselves in, that we note that all systems that recognize a sense of the sacred agree upon. And redeveloping these systems and helping them learn to talk together more fruitfully, I think, is going to be part of the key to the solution we seek.
And on a technical note, guys, there is a very, very minor difference between the video and the audio. It will be fixed next week, but there's nothing I can do about it right now. I'm thinking about you guys.
We will figure that out, guys.
Yeah.
Yep. We're
new
using
technologies,
new machines, and we'll have to figure out how things
We're trying to build an anti-fragile system here. It takes some time. Some scuffed elbows.
Yeah, really. It's been a process, but we're getting there.
I like it.
So yeah. I'm loving the direction we're going here, and this is going to soon be a very well streamlined podcast, fam. But it's a live stream. It's a chill. You guys are here to learn and grow together with us as well. So we're not,
And also, Kipper Cano, if anything, Frog and Toad have the male version of a Boston marriage. LOL.
Nice. What's up, Kim? That's a great comment. Thank you for sharing, fam. We are here. I'm monitoring the chats live, guys. I don't see why that didn't pop up here for me, though. I'm going to have to fix the chat monitoring software I'm using.
Oh, boy.
So to jump back in, guys, let's go. Here we are. Switch here.
So I just made a list, and it was things like Spiritual practices involve making something sacred. And we all agree this thing is sacred. And we worship it. We have sacred days. So, in the Jewish religion, we have the Shabbat, Sabbath. You're not supposed to use electronics if you're Orthodox. Things are sacred. And it's sharing the sacredness binds us together. That's what every religious community does. But a life online, nothing is sacred. There's no sacred time. The internet never closes. It's global. There are no holidays. There are no holy days. And the constant demand for you to post about your brand, what you're doing, look at the amazing life I have.
Yeah. So the internet has pulled us out of the traditions of attending to the sacred that we used to have. That's, we used to have Sundays where you don't sell or buy anything. You get a break from the marketplace because it makes us go crazy if we're too deeply saturated in that constant market system.
Well, and even during the feudal era of Europe, they got a lot of days off for religious holidays and other such holidays. But it is important for us to take time off of busyness.
Yeah, because the internet is 24/7, so it's interrupting all of these, like the Sabbath where you don't use electronics.
And in actuality and definitionally, there is nothing sacred on the internet. If you know anything about troll culture, nothing is sacred. And if
Nothing
you remember,
is treated as such.
and if you remember early internet, man, like that was wild. Like or old chat rooms on like playing Call of Duty and stuff like that, old chat and stuff like that, dude.
Oh yeah. What a
The
mess.
kids nowadays couldn't handle a Call of Duty chat back in 2011, 2010.
Boy.
Or even further back when you had AOL chat rooms and everybody was just wilding out, texting at each other.
Yeah. It was actually pretty civil at first when AOL chat
Yeah.
rooms came along. I remember spending some time with people in different countries, or like the world chat where all these different people were together. Is so cool, actually. And people were pretty kind for the most part at first. And then the culture of trolling actually developed over time. So now we're going to hit our last clip of the night, guys. How can we transcend these higher ideals and save civilization, what is good and best in the human species as we move forward? Let's go.
So we have a Posted After Babel. We're just taking on this really wonderful British writer, a young woman named Freya India, Gen Z writer.
I like
And she has
name.
a post which starts with, you see a photo of a young woman posing for a sexy selfie on the train tracks in front of Auschwitz. Here she is. She's on some tour of Auschwitz, the concentration camp. But it's a nice day in Poland, and so she poses in a sexy way in front of the gates of hell. And so, if everyone's a brand manager all the time, nothing is sacred. Oh, and it's all about you. Whereas one of the keys to spirituality is it's not all about you. You actually are not that important. It's only when you can transcend your self-interest, that you can open your heart to God, to our higher motives, to love, to other people. So, you just go through the list. Whatever the ancients urge us to do to achieve spiritual progress, a life lived online, even for us adults, pulls us in the opposite direction.
I couldn't agree.
It.
Well,
That's it.
it's like there's no awareness when there's total, like the ability to be able to look at everything. There is no awareness, right? Like this girl in this case, she's taking the sexy selfie in front of Auschwitz, which is just another location to do something at and, travel to and get a pic without the awareness of, well, yet again, the filial piety, the people who came before you, the ancestors that came before you, the things that happened before, even to realize that she was in front of the gates of hell, as he said, and what that place is. When they had the parkour runners who would run across the memorial stones and stuff like that. And then, those guys are assholes, but they're not aware of a transcendent existence at all, because it's just me. And that's what Satan is like, Satanism or Luciferianism or whatever you want to call it. That's what it is. It's just me,
Yeah.
me.
Me. Yeah, not honoring the sacredness of life in those around you.
And just not aware of that there's something sacred to life.
Now, you might
know?
be, you can see the sacred in those that you're allied with and that you agree with.
But
can you do that with those with whom you disagree?
But is that really like see the sacredness in them, or is that just arbitrarily holding those that are closer to you
right
on a higher preferential status than
well, that's probably
any
more
other
along the lines of what
existence?
that actually is.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because, you know, sacredness is something much deeper than that. It's
Yeah, if you recognize their sacredness and the value of their life, then if you saw them doing something wrong, you would say something about it, even if you agree with them and you want to have
sure.
their acceptance, you know. But
well, ideally, like your best of friends should be the ones that can hit
Call
you
you
at the
out.
harshest of things, you know, and you know that you can be and also be most blunt with.
and are brave enough to do that for
Yeah.
you. Yeah, and care enough to do that for you, even if they know it's going to upset you initially. That's true. It's a great point.
We can't extend that to a societal level. I believe we can. I'm not sure how we go about doing that exactly, but I think that we can. Well, we have one mechanism as far as like, you know, the calling out the bullshit, and that's our comedians and our appreciation of humor
right.
and how to be humorous and not just vindictive and mean.
Yep. Agreed.
But you know, like all the stuff's there, man. Humans have been humaning for a very long time, and we've been figuring this out for a very long time. I just think right now we've said screw all the old stuff, except for like the stuff that makes us feel better about our conclusions in life, or at least the misreading of the old stuff. And let's just keep going on with the new and the new and the new and the new. It's just like, well, you kind of need the old, like. No, you're not always just building a new house. Sometimes you're going to have to live in that house for a while.
Right.
You know, I grew up in a house in Charlestown that was built in the 1890s. You know, we used to practice in a house in Maryland that was built in the 1890s.
That's right.
And yeah, and it was sitting on top of dirt. It's got a dirt basement, but man, they kind of built it right, so it shifts and it changes and whatever, but it settles the way it needs to. And there's a rock quarry right across the street, so you better believe it dealt with some blasting and.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's not super pretty or nothing like that. It's not glitzy and glammy and like one of these new things, but you looked at new architecture lately, it's ugly. And the stuff that is actually beautiful isn't comfortable, at least in my opinion. You know, there's a lot of this modern architecture ain't comfortable, just like a lot of this modern sensibilities ain't comfortable for me. And I'm a liberal, man. Like mentally, I'm liberal. I'm not quite progressive. I do believe in the progress of the species, but man, it's like, we've thrown out so much good old stuff for the sake of the crappy new stuff.
I know. It's wild. Yeah, because liberalism today is warping and shifting, or what is infesting what was typically known as liberalism is it's warping our sense of what that actually means anymore. Whatever has infested the Democratic Party today is the same thing that seems to have infested the Republican Party under the presidency of George Bush Jr. and Dick Cheney, who at the time, towards the end of the war in Iraq, 85% plus of the American public had realized that war was a complete debacle and a mistake, and that George Bush and Dick Cheney had abysmally low approval ratings. Congress, I believe, was at the lowest point of approval in its history, or close to it, as single digits of approval for Congress. It's like an 8 or 9%, or maybe even a little lower. And the same with George Bush. He got down to like around 14 or 15%, like abysmally low. So we were seeing George Bush and Dick Cheney as war criminals. All of a sudden now, Dick Cheney is endorsing Kamala Harris, and she's proud of that. And it used to be, the very fundamentalist conservatives that were calling for censorship, and the liberals that were always protecting free speech, and now that has flipped as well. So we are certainly in a sea change.
Well, it's very much that girl taking sexy selfies of herself in front of Auschwitz, and the lack of awareness of that is even wrong,
right?
Or
right.
or what that is like. Oh well, but we're unity. But Dick Cheney, so we're going to unify with that. It's like, but like, don't you remember what happened? Not. 20 years, 25 years ago with all this nonsense. Like, no, but like we got this unity thing and, it's working. It was like, I don't think that word means what you think it means.
Really?
Yeah, well, it's the lack of, yet again, awareness, because like in order to be aware, you have to train it. Like you have to say to
And you have to be willing to be considerate, to consider other points of view.
Yeah, consider it. Consider.
You got to be able to inform. That's So
and,
consider.
and we have to learn how to consider things too.
And you cannot have wisdom without having compassion. Compassion is what gives us the willingness to consider multiple points of views, the willingness to put ourselves in others' shoes and see from their perspectives. If you can't do that, then you're lost in a very narrow mindset. But when you open your heart and your awareness to the world and you're willing to consider more, you're able to take in more information. You're able to be more considerate. That's why being willing to be considerate is what leads us to wisdom. Compassion leads to wisdom, not the other way around. That was a point that I believe the Buddha put forth.
You got to learn the compassion before you can get the wisdom.
Yes.
It's not that you get the wisdom and then you'll become compassionate.
That's right. Yeah. Compassion leads to wisdom, not wisdom to compassion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and yeah, I could see that. And
you got to care. You got to care enough to be able to be willing to look at other points of view.
And
so you got to be more selfless instead of selfish.
And also part of being selfless is realizing like what the self actually needs to get going by and take care of the self. That was, the story of, Siddhartha when he's, in the movie, at least when he's sitting there on the shore and it's like, well, if this bowl of rice floats upstream, then I can eat the rice. And I think the story goes a little bit differently, but it's basically, he's been starving himself over and over and over again. And then finally it just cracked and was like, dude, I got to eat. Yeah. I got a human. I got to do the thing. I got to be out there. I got to look after myself. We should pay attention to that. Look after yourself, eat right, try to be healthy, work on the crap that's in your head, get with others to help work on the crap that's within your head. And
but do so from an orientation that wants to care for one and all. So not just for oneself, so that you're self-involved.
We're a social species. They're like, yes, there is a difference between self and all, but when it comes down to our longevity and well-being, we aren't ourself when we aren't healthily incorporated with the all.
Yes, that's right.
You don't have to be all in it, but even the hermit has to communicate with a few people and have a relationship with a few people or a few things. It's not,
we can't help the world if we don't help ourselves as well. So that's very important.
And we can't help ourselves if we don't help the world either, because you can't grow all of your food and hunt all of your, well, most of us can't grow all of our food and hunt all of our food.
Yeah.
We
need to be able to care enough for one and all in order to be balanced and healthy as a human being, because we are a social species. The individual's freedoms are paramount and are of utmost importance, but those freedoms exist in a larger cultural framework, in a larger civilizational framework. So there's a reason that the individual should be free, because he's the smallest minority. And if you can protect the rights of the individual, you can protect all the minorities. If you can teach the individuals to recognize that the outer is as important as the inner, then we can get ourselves into a healthy left-right brain configuration to where we're able to see multiple sides of a story and position ourselves as need be, regardless of whatever situation we find ourselves in.
They're not, greatest or lessest. It's optimal.
Yeah.
Not less or more. It's optimal.
Yeah. Yeah. The outer cannot be addressed without healthy individuals.
Yeah. Well, that's what's wrong with the kids. The kids ain't all right.
Yeah.
We're kind of like really messing with societally a whole step of creating healthy individuals, and healthy individuals create healthy societies. We're kind of messing with that right now. And we haven't even started to see it, because like my generation, and I'm a millennial, and I'm a early mid millennial. I listen to the music of Gen X, but I'm a millennial. We got the beginning of this stuff. And then, well, imagine the kids that were going through their formative years during COVID, when they become adults, and the decisions that they're going to have to make, ill-equipped or more equipped, depending on how they showed up as they are.
Yeah.
And then the crap that we're doing right now. We're on the edge of like total global war.
Yeah, we are.
Our entire media complex is lying to us all the time. And
everybody is rightfully scared of what's going to happen this very election in less than a week now here in the States.
Oh boy. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot, and that's actually I think what we're going to be covering next week. How can't we? We have to.
I don't mind covering it.
So we're going to cover the election. Of course, we're most likely not even going to know who's president by next Wednesday. The way things are going.
Hey, with the way the things are going, we'll go ahead and get our stream cut down, and we'll get another. We'll get hit with another election misinformation, and you won't see us for a week.
We're going to do our best, guys. Definitely tune in next week.
Yeah, show up live because we might not be around after it's live. As far as the episode goes.
Yeah. Catch it while it's happening. We always record them in the background. So if any episode ever does get taken down, we did have an episode get taken down. The one with Robert F. Kennedy, his interview with Tucker Carlson, it is still on Spotify, Apple, Google, and the podcast networks. It's only YouTube that censored us on that one. So for future reference, and for now, if you want to find any of our videos that ever get censored, go check out the podcast side of things, and you can enjoy what's happening over there as well. So I think that that's enough for this episode, but thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're doing the best we can over here, and we know you all are hoping to, trying to, wanting to do that as well.
If you're watching us, you should be at least aspiring to be.
And that's that's kind of where we're at too. We're aspiring
to do the best we can.
We're trying to be more virtuous, more honest, more honorable, truer people in this world, and
more optimized organisms.
Absolutely. And the most efficient way and the most long-term effect comes from when we change this world from the inside out. The revolution begins within, fam. And we are right here with you, learning and growing together. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Actuali Podcast. Stay tuned for next week. It's going to be a big one. So, love you guys. We will see you next time. I've been Chris.
I've been DJ.
Peace, fam. We out.
Meow.